Thank you for the opportunity to testify in support with a slight amendment of HB 7281, an act amending a prior conveyance of a parcel of state land to the town of Southbury to change the restrictions on ownership and leasing of said parcel. I'm Jason Buchsbaum, State Representative for the 69th House District, which includes the towns of Southbury, Bridgewater, Roxbury, and New Milford. House Bill 7281 was generated based on a request from the Southbury Board of Selectmen and concerns a portion of the Southbury Training School property known as the Personnel Village. HB 7281 would amend existing legislation. By way of background, this property was identified years ago by a local nonprofit named Pierce Hollow Village as a site for affordable senior housing development in the town of Southbury. In 2013, the legislature adopted Special Act 13-23, later amended by Public Act 16-1, to allow the conveyance of the property to Southbury for housing purposes. The existing law also allows Southbury to lease the property to a nonprofit for purposes of senior housing and was tailored towards the Pierce Hollow project. Pierce Hollow Village commenced planning a senior housing development at the site, which had widespread community support. Unfortunately, state and national funding became limited for this type of project as priorities shifted. And sadly, based on that reality, Pierce Hollow Village dissolved in September 2023. And that brings us to the need for HB 7281. At this time, if the town of Southbury wanted to pursue a housing development at the subject property, it is limited and it can only lease the property for senior housing purposes. The purpose of HB 7281 is to remove the senior housing restriction that exists under current law. This would give Southbury the needed ability to explore alternative housing opportunities that may be available for the property, which could still include senior housing. Southbury is seeking greater flexibility as to the use and manner of future development and is requesting the changes outlined in HB 7281 to ensure that it does not have to return to the legislature each time a new housing potential is identified. Therefore, I ask the members of the committee to support HB 7281. I am requesting one modification to the proposed legislation. Standard language was added to HB 7281, which would require that any funds received by the town from a sale or lease of the property be paid to the state. I respectfully request that this language be modified. Specifically, I'm requesting that the requirement that all funds from a lease or sale be paid to the state be amended so that Southbury could recover costs expended in furtherance of a transfer to it and in pursuit of development, including any ongoing costs of ownership. As stated already, HB 7281 is simply amending current law, and the existing law, which already allows for the leasing of the property, does not contain this additional language. As written, this law and the existing legislation requires Southbury to engage in certain activities and expend funds to allow for the transfer of the subject property to it, including a survey and environmental impact evaluation, which could then result in additional terms and conditions in accordance with subsection C of the legislation. In addition to those costs, future costs of ownership, including for solicitation and preparation for leasing or sale and development of the property, are unknown at this time. Under a lease scenario, Southbury would retain the responsibility of ownership, and costs to it during the lease are unknown until a lease is negotiated. Therefore, given the circumstances presented by the Southbury Training School property and the current legislation, including removing the state from the burdens and costs of ownership of the property, I request that the committee consider this proposed modification. Thank you for the opportunity to present testimony on HB 7281. I urge the members of the committee to support the legislation along with this slight change outlined today. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Repurposing of this conveyance, how are we going to be able to achieve that for the senior residents of Southbury?
Southbury does have one of the highest senior populations in the state of Connecticut, and this project, which was always intended to be an affordable senior housing project, has had widespread community support, and I'm one of the strongest supporters of it over the years, and we've advocated for it. We've advocated to the state for funding. We actually allocated a significant portion of ARPA funds toward this project as sort of to try and entice further funding. And those efforts didn't work. So what we're left with now is we're left with legislation that limits that it can only be used for senior housing, and the types of funding that would be available for affordable senior housing have dried up. So the only way, in my view, to actually see some activity there and perhaps move towards that goal is to loosen the restrictions, to provide broader language in the statute to allow, like what we're asking for is generally that it be permitted to be used for housing purposes, so then the town has the flexibility to evaluate what's out there. And, if it was up to me, I would still love to see senior housing or a component of senior housing at that site because it is such an important need in the community. This is what's called Personnel Village. This is where the workers at the training school used to live when the training school was, much more fully operational than it is today. There's structures, there's infrastructure, there's roads, and it was identified as a good site for this kind of development because it was housing already. So the town in this request is not asking to change that restriction. They're asking to change the part where it can only lease it to a facility for senior housing.
So it'd be housing no matter what?
Correct.